because usually I'm half a world away. But today, boom, I'm broadcasting from Boston, Massachusetts, because my family has completed their migration to the United States. We are now with you and of you, and I am now, instead of an outsider broadcasting on American politics, I'm an insider. I'm here living these circumstances, not just commenting on the reckless indifference of Republicans to human life. I'm calling them out with a very personal investment. My children will be in September attending school with other children, some of whom will have unvaccinated parents, some of whom will be promulgating the spread of a deadly virus, deadly for some, that is increasingly hospitalizing children, and whilst preventing hospitalizations and severe cases for vaccinated people, can still infect even vaccinated people with breakthrough cases. And the Delta variant is still presumed to be more than 2 times more contagious than the original COVID variant. So I'm invested in it at a very personal level now, as well as just intellectually deploring the stance of anti-safety, anti-democracy, anti-science people who jeopardize the health and safety of others, and who undermine the sacrifices made by people who have done the right thing, who have been team players, who have been vigilant, stayed home, got vaccinated as soon as they could, worn masks, acted as if they were part of a cohesive society with shared goals of safety and creating space for each other to flourish and grow. So there's so much more weight to what I'm saying today. It's some pressure. As you may be able to hear, my children are on holidays together with American children. My children are American children, sort of, right now. It'll take us probably a few years to get citizenship. Wow. It's so overwhelming. It's so overwhelming for me to be in a country now where masks aren't compulsory anymore at this stage. Although California mask mandates have returned because of the surge in the Delta variant, because the level needed to be achieved for herd immunity has not been reached via vaccination levels yet. And the levels of vaccination refusal, vaccination defiance, etc., are as high as they are, in part because of the successes of Republican and Russian efforts to muddy the waters and to take advantage of people's occasional predilection for the inaction bias, where you do nothing because maybe you've heard from Facebook, maybe you've heard from Tucker Carlson that they are trying to deprive you of your liberty. So I'm going to share a few resources that I've come across today. One is a video from Political Girl, who makes a very potent, from the heart statement about what France has done to mandate vaccines before you can visit the cinema and malls and participate in other enjoyable activities. So I'll let her speak for herself. She's made a great video, and I'm keen for it. Different here, which she says, accent. Hang on, pause this and play it again with the volume. Okay, so prepare yourselves. Her Twitter address is I am politics girl.
So France ordered compulsory vaccination all healthcare and proof of either vaccination or a negative.
Hang on, start again.
So France ordered compulsory vaccination all health proof of either vaccination or a negative COVID test to enter like that. and it's at cafe, theaters, and malls and stuff. And days after the order came down, a record amount of people got vaccinated. The first 5 days got vaccinated because, shocker, they didn't want to not do stuff. And here's the thing, that's what we should do in America. No one's infringing on your freedoms. You're free to not get the vaccine or test for COVID, but you're not free to hang out with the rest of us if you make that choice. Stop telling us to stay home if we're scared. You stay home if you chose fear of the deadly virus. Those of us who quarantined and social distance and to be the carrier vaccinated, you're out of your choice. Do what you just can't do it without limiting your freedom. We're limiting your access. And if you don't like that, then get a vaccine or negative COVID, or just hang out with other unvaccinated people. You don't want more variants or more people to be connected. People make each other sick. We don't want more variants for dead people just because you refuse to be a team player. So, vive la France! That's what done. Mange merde. D'accord? Bien.
Bien. I would have said bien slightly differently, but she is saying in French, if you don't like it, si tu n'aimes pas, mange merde, which is eat feces, and bien, which is good, literally, but the French equivalent of saying, all right. So that's a potent statement. Sorry that the internet connection seems to be a little fuzzy. But yes, I've got probably different viewers than I normally have, so I should introduce myself. I'm Davina. Hi. And I've been broadcasting for 3 years from the other side of the world about American politics and the threat to human life posed by Donald Trump and his predilection for criminal, self-serving behavior at others' expense, which in relation to a crisis, an international crisis, resulted in a level of depraved indifference to human life that rose to my mind to the level of criminal behavior. America's justice system is quite ponderous and lengthy, which is commendable in many ways for the emphasis placed on innocence and the assumptions of innocence and protecting the innocent, rather than saying, well, any innocent person caught up in an accusation is collateral damage to justice. So America is not prepared to suffer collateral damage of the innocent, but at the same time, all of the elaborate measures built in to protect the innocent, sometimes white people begin to see more that baked in white favoritism causes that elaborate mechanisms of justice to still produce outcomes whereby white criminals get away with things and Black innocent people, the mechanisms of innocence protection don't work properly for them. So we've seen and despaired a little over white criminals getting away with tax avoidance, getting away with Republicans voting against provisions to give the IRS more money so they have the resources needed to audit wealthy people, to hold wealthy people to account, instead of only middle class or low wage, low wealth people being investigated and forced to comply with tax laws. Because the injustice of that stings, and it's a self-perpetuating injustice. If wealthy people are allowed to maintain, to keep more money to themselves, they're increasing their purchasing power. And some of that purchasing power is not just for phallic competitions in big dildos shaped rockets to touch the top of the atmosphere for a few minutes as some kind of status competition. They're also sometimes using those extraordinary billions of dollars to purchase political power, to purchase ads for Supreme Court justices who then contribute to jeopardizing access to the vote, particularly for Democrat voting African Americans, who often have the pragmatic skills to see past Republican culture war propaganda and to vote for the political party that is relatively less captured by wealthy interests, wealthy self-serving interests. Because I have nothing against wealth per se. I'm not a communist who wants to eat the rich or wants to bring guillotines to bear on the situation. I want the justice system to function appropriately. I want systems of government regulation to function appropriately. And if we've learned anything from Trump, the 4 years of essentially mass murder, mass manslaughter, and environmental degradation of the Trumpian years, let us learn that people get complacent when they look around them and see diversity, people getting along, LGBTQ days where there are pride flags and corporations with promoting freedom to love consenting adults amongst different groups of different preferences and different gender expressions. We can get complacent thinking we live in a tolerant society and not realizing that the American political system is not an exact representation, because it's not a direct democracy. It's a representative democracy that is stacked towards the interests of slavocrats and the descendants of slavocrats and the intellectual descendants of slavocrats. And that was built into the Constitution to bring on board and get the support of very wealthy people whose wealth was a function of the exploitative nature of a slave-based economy, and that generated great wealth for some and overall great geopolitical influence for the United States. And that when forming a new nation and when writing a constitution, the electoral college system and the system of awarding 2 senators to each state, regardless of population size, was a move that gave weighting to states with lower populations of white male voters, but large slave populations, relatively speaking, so that slaves could have their bodies used in the 3/5 compromise to count as 3 out of every 5 enslaved people were used to expand the population tallies for each state, which was used to then determine how many representatives were drawn from each state to then have political clout in the House of Representatives, as well as the malapportionment nature of 2 senators from each state. Weighting the population, weighting the political influence of low population but high wealth, agricultural power figures, i.e. people who made a lot of money from agriculture, which at that stage had its profitability driven by the freedom of not paying your workers because you owned your workers and you traded your workers and you broke up their families and you oppressed them and you embraced the fact that it was illegal for them to learn to read, and you went to a church that celebrated your power, your unethical, inappropriate power over people. And the church then helped you rationalize that and venerate that position that white people were superior. So the inheritors of that rationalization, that poisonous influence, gives people a worldview that makes them racist, yes, but not just racist, politically destructive to the rest of America. Because if you have racist, irrational worldviews about how white people are superior to black people, that is the product of an age-old guilty conscience, a motivated ignorance towards the outcomes of racism in America, not just the outcomes of slavery, but the follow-through outcomes of people who continue to deprive Black Americans of justice, of the economic rewards that they're due, and deprive them of access to financial ladders, such as being able to obtain mortgages through financial institutions. That type of ongoing oppression that white people who can't deal have motivated ignorance about, i.e. they choose to not believe that anything bad has happened in the last 100 years to Black Americans, or even in the last 50 years, and they certainly refuse to believe that there is any persistent racism now and persistent negative outcomes associated with the baked-in inertia of racist tendencies, not just amongst individuals, but amongst institutions. So I need to be able to put it more simply. Trump should have taught us that American democracy is subverted by racism. It's subverted by an appetite for lies created by an emotional need to disavow guilt and to create pride. The very name of the Proud Boys tells us where these holes are in the American psyche for some people, that some people are so desperate to be proud of a white history where everyday rational people are learning more about the clay feet of the heroes and the founding fathers. And they say, no, we absolutely cannot have that level of honesty in teaching. We have to speak more strongly to reclaim our pride in whiteness and our pride in Western development and our pride in industrialization. That overweening indulgent need for pride causes people to deny climate change because nothing can possibly be wrong with industrialization. Nothing can possibly be wrong. Oh, it flipped me out for a second. I mean, but yes, that need for pride, for Proud Boys, their very existence is a big lie, because the big lie is, don't tell me about history. I'm white and I refuse to hear it because I need to be proud of being white. So I cannot bear to hear honest teaching. I cannot bear critical race theory, and I cannot bear anything I choose to call critical race theory, which is essentially honesty in education. So none of my usual audiences here, because they don't expect me to be broadcasting at this time, but I'm still going to go through my This is the Midas brothers, who've made a video about Marjorie Taylor Greene. And she gave a response to a reporter who asked her if she felt any compunction about destabilizing public health, because Marjorie Taylor Greene is an anti-vaccination activist now, as are many GOP people who are doing that out of loyalty to Donald Trump, because Donald Trump his administration helped pay for some vaccination development, not all. They helped expedite vaccine development through government funding, which is great. Thanks, Donald. But they then couldn't bring themselves to actually roll it out efficiently, because efficiency is not a key feature of fascism. Fascism being a democracy that's perverted into taking advantage of people's emotional vulnerabilities and any lies that people believe. So in Germany, the lies that people believed were Germany didn't lose World War I, it was just betrayed by Jews and communists. And really, Germany won World War I. So that lie, because the media didn't really report very accurately on military losses that Germany was experiencing, and Germany's ultimate loss and surrender to the Allies in World War I, created this big gulf between expectation and reality. That gulf was then noted and catered to by Hitler, because exploitative con men will sometimes rise up to fill a space where they see a need. And for racists who believe the only racism that exists in modern day society is racism against white people, those people have a big gulf between their expectations and reality. Donald Trump filled that need. He was still a shyster and a huck, and he betrayed America's expectations of civil democracy. So many people were complacent and thought he'll never possibly succeed. And it's true, he needed help. He needed the help of America's enemies, who wanted to exploit those fault lines in American society and wanted to exploit those areas of vulnerability. You're vulnerable wherever you believe a lie, or wherever your conception of reality is very distorted and very disparate from truth. So wherever men felt unfairly oppressed because women were being more vocal about how oppressive it is to fear sexual attacks, how oppressive it is to live in a culture where it's hard to call powerful people to account for harassing or assaulting you. Men who thought that circumstances were made up then felt oppressed and felt like they weren't allowed to be proud of being men, felt like they were being asked to feel guilty because of the actions of some men. See, what emotionally mature people can do in those situations is just decry wrongdoing and say, that's bad. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be part of supporting that or allowing it. I condemn it. And just because I'm a man and the bad person who did the bad things is a man, doesn't mean I share their shame or I have to share their shame or guilt. It's just an extra motivator for me to have resolve to condemn it, to say, I look like that person. Let me assure you that I renounce it. I don't want any part of that. I don't think society should encourage it. And to maybe work to understand it as well, to say maybe in the past society allowed it because that was a sacrifice that we allowed women to make, because not we allowed women to make, that was the sacrifice society compelled women to make to compensate to men the fact that they were the cannon fodder in wars, that we compelled men to be conscripted into military forces and that their lives were sacrificed in wartime, but not the lives of women. Actually, that's a pattern you can see all over the world. It's not that the women say, yes, I consent to being raped or assaulted or harassed. It's just men who engage in battle often create that transaction for themselves. They say, here I am risking my life. I will now rape some people to make it up to myself. These are the deals we sometimes make with ourselves. Eating a cookie if you've had a hard day looking after small children. Some of those deals are dysfunctional. The cookie deal, that can give you diabetes if you're too self-indulgent. And raping people, if you're in a war scenario, is a war crime and you shouldn't do it. And you might come across consequences if a justice system manages to function appropriately. There's lots of obstacles to justice systems functioning appropriately because lots of people don't want to call men to account for harming women, because lots of people on some level accept that bargain. Exposure to harm for men, sacrifice the emotional and physical well-being of any women who have the misfortune of being in the path of a bellicose, hyped up man who's prepared to risk his life for battle. Even footballers act like that sometimes. Hey, I've risked my physical well-being on the football field. I'm all hyped up on testosterone. I will now commit some crimes of sexual assault. I will now impose my will on a woman who hasn't consented. So, yes. It's so different for me broadcasting at this time because I don't have my usual audience, so I have very few commentators. It's much less interactive than normal, and I'm not used to this. So I miss my friends. I hope I should have given them some warning that I was going to broadcast at this time, but I didn't know. I've been getting over some jet lag from moving halfway across the world, and I'll see if I can keep up broadcasting at this time or even earlier. Or not, because now there's kind of a one-to-one correspondence. I can broadcast at any time and my audience is likely to be awake. This was always a challenge when I was in Singapore or Australia, and when I was awake, Americans were asleep, and I had to try and find a time that would work at the margins of wake time or sleep time. So welcome to anybody to whom this broadcast is new. Oops. We were going to listen to Marjorie Taylor Greene because I said today that the topic of this broadcast was going to be why have Republicans flipped? Why have some Republicans flipped on their vaccine statements? Why they now suddenly are endorsing the need to get vaccinated, which is good. Endorse vaccination. Let's get more people vaccinated and save more lives and reduce the threat of a Delta surge jeopardizing the lives of the unvaccinated who haven't even chosen that for themselves. The children under 12, the people with compromised immune systems, people for whom vaccinations don't work because their immune systems are less likely to to take that template instruction from a vaccine and say, okay, that's how we need to respond if we encounter the COVID virus. That's what we need to do to manufacture the antibodies to smack that disease down before it can take hold in our bodies and cause serious illness or death. Or long COVID. I mean, the idea of long COVID affecting children is also a terrifying idea. And I think Republicans have suddenly encountered the polling that shows them the likely hemorrhaging in suburbs from Republican women who don't appreciate having their children's lives put into danger by Republican contrarianism. Because that is the steam that's fueled Trumpism. That's the steam that has fueled modern day fascism all around the world. The contrary yearning for self-importance at the expense of the elites or modern society. And I'm not going to blame modern society and go, oh, how have we betrayed them? Because it's not economic fear. It's not any one thing. All the people supporting fascists and buying into QAnon all around the world are just driven by a hunger for a story to explain things to themselves so that they can experience more positive emotions. When you subscribe to a conspiracy theory, you feel more powerful. If you take that confusion from having access to the internet and being able to access information about suffering all over the world, to have access to information about increasingly severe and increasingly frequent natural disasters, with that frequency being a product of global overheating or climate change, whereby the downside of industrialization, that the carbon emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions that are trapping increasing amounts of heat in our atmosphere as we continue to emit more and more tons of carbon dioxide, of methane, etc. The fact that we haven't dealt with that problem. People, when they can sense there are problems and feel overwhelmed by exposure to other people's pain and suffering, they want a nice story about how they can be free of anxiety. Well, it's not going to happen to me. I believe in Jesus. Or it's not going to happen to me. I'm reserving my outrage for people who try and say I shouldn't have guns in my home, or people who try and tell me that statistics say you're less safe if you have a gun in your home because then you're more at risk of somebody coming into your home, taking that gun and shooting you with it, or a family member killing somebody else in a fit of emotional dysregulation, or whether it be anger or depression. Oh, Perry Pilot is still listening but sunbathing, so couldn't chat. That's cool, Perry Pilot. I'm glad you're still listening. Thank you. And congratulations on getting some vitamin D. It's hard in the UK. Yes, absolutely. Must make the most of sunny days. Better World is here. Hello, Better World. And says, bless you. If we do not speak out every day, we are complicit. It's very true. What I do as a broadcaster is targeted to empower others, to find the words, to have the confidence to speak out and be vocal. Because when fascism rears its ugly head and everybody suffers as a consequence of the contagion of shared empowerment of cruelty, of cruel philosophies that say, well, migrants should stay out. They're not one of us. We're not a country that's built on the contributions of migrants. No. That couldn't be the case. We've all been here forever, and this is our place that we built it. Enslaved people didn't build America. No. Migrant people don't do the backbreaking physical labor on farms so that we can eat. No. I denounce all of that's not true. It's all fake. The real thing is Trump. Trump is real. His Kool-Aid is delicious. And there's a secret conspiracy of people in Hollywood, etc. And they're drinking children's blood. That's much more persuasive to me. We don't want no Fauci ouchie. Can you feel the contrarian glee of those people. Because you talk to reasonable people and they'll say, I don't understand how anybody believes this. Why is my email inbox full of relatives and colleagues sending me memes about how the vaccination is secretly going to kill you? Why are they sending this to me? What has happened to these people? They are in a cult that escalates. And by a cult, they don't have to shave their head or adopt a religious belief. They're sharing a cultish joy of irrational belief. Like in a movie, it's enjoyable to suspend disbelief and just immerse yourself in a fictional universe. Those people have got a different type of enjoyment of immersing themselves in a very empowering, very clear, very morally clear to them alternate universe in which Tom Hanks is a reprobate. And I was wondering why they were targeting Tom Hanks, because it's not because Tom Hanks is guilty of what they suggest. He doesn't keep children in a dungeon and harvest them for adrenochrome or whatever they claim. I'm guessing it started targeting Tom Hanks because he was the first celebrity to be infected with COVID. Is that why? Maybe someone else can find out the timeline of that for me if they're curious. But Tom Hanks and Rita Hanks were in Australia, contracted COVID, self-quarantined, and reported back to the world what they were experiencing. Rita's here and says, hi, Dav, are you not in Australia anymore? No, I'm not in Australia anymore. I'm in the United States, baby. Which makes me less of a crazy person, obsessive from half a world away. It puts me at ground zero for combating the ongoing perversion of American democracy, the ongoing threat to the safety of men, women, and children, occasioned by disinformation campaigns that are destabilizing not only America, but the world, because the internet connects all of us. So I was also being affected by Trump's disinformation and Trump's threat to the world. You know, he wanted to start a war with Iran. This is something that came out in the last few days. It's probably not top of the news because it's not breaking just did. It's not something he was trying to start a war with Iran in the last few days of his presidency. And General Mark Milley has disclosed to reporters since that time that Trump wanted to go to war and he told him, no, do not start a war with Iran. I made so many broadcasts saying, oh my gosh, Trump's going to start a war with Iran. I could feel the crescendo of propaganda towards selling that idea to the American people. Oh no, what's Iran doing now? Oh dear, it's something terrible. And it wasn't really that terrible. It's not great because Iran is a totalitarian, despotic regime that oppresses people and are bad actors, but they weren't threatening America. I could see and hear the Trump administration trying to make something of that. Oh, beautiful. Christopher Lucas is listening, and he says, listening to you on my drive to work, I feel like I'm listening to the morning news. I can get used to this. Welcome home. Oh, bless you, Christopher. That welcome home is so welcome to me because my head has been in the US for more than 3 years now. And now my physical body is in the US too. And I'm not commentating from a distance. I'm here. I got enough of an attraction and skill, apparently active resume set and experience level to be headhunted to work in Boston. And I feel relatively safe in Boston, but I'm still watching increasing COVID numbers. And I know that Boston still has people who are unvaccinated. 63.3% of adults in Boston are fully vaccinated. So that's still a substantial portion of adults who aren't. And some of those adults will have children, and some of those adults will be sending their children to school with my children. And it's going to be exposing my children to danger because my children aren't vaccinated. They're too young. they're under 12. So, yep. And where I was, Singapore, there are people who listen to disinformation online, American disinformation, Russian disinformation, and they also refuse vaccines for a multitude of reasons. Look, even without propaganda, we've talked about the inaction bias before, where when people muddy the waters and say, but what if the vaccination is worse than the disease? And people say, what if? Well, I don't know for sure, so I'll just do the easy thing, nothing. So I still haven't played Marjorie Taylor Greene yet. Let's play her, this ad that the Midas brothers have compiled. Good use of footage. They're really ramping home to people the irresponsibility of people in the GOP who have undermined public health by disparaging the vaccine. So there's a lot of people to point at with regards to vaccine disinformation. A lot of people in Fox, in OAN, in Newsmax, some of whom are now trying to cover their butts and say, oh, we support vaccination. Go talk to your doctor, find out what's right for you. But vaccination may very well be the right thing to do. Yep, vaccination's great. They've heard, and the coordination of it, the fact that some Republican politicians and simultaneously some people in conservative media have been saying, oh, we never said anything. We never disparaged the vaccine. We just said individual choice. You do the right thing for you. Yep. Is Marjorie Taylor Greene being held to account for her actions?
Do you feel any responsibility for keeping people in Georgia safe? You know, there are children, skinny people who have died of the coronavirus. Do you feel any responsibility?
We're learning more about a little died, and the family was taken by surprise when little Wyatt tested positive. Surprise. It's not a low family-year-old girl.
438 in one day. Giving them baby. 5 girls, their only child, a 5-year-old girl, to coaching.
Yeah.
So, Midas touch. Yep. They're doing the Lord's work. And I say the Lord in a very general sense here. Sorry for the imperfections of the internet connection. I hope when we move into more permanent residence, at the moment I'm staying somewhere temporarily, while we house hunt or rental property hunt, that I'll find somewhere with a good internet connection. But for now, this is the best I have to offer. And that video about Marjorie Taylor Greene highlights the concern that people have that their children's safety is being compromised by the depraved recklessness of Republicans and Republican sympathetic media or Republican coalition media. They're in a secret coalition. I mean, Trump didn't hide the fact that, or at least it was disclosed, that Trump used to call Sean Hannity every night and frequently talked to Tucker Carlson. We don't know what Tucker Carlson's communications with Kremlin operatives are, but he did recently make a big song and dance about being monitored by the National Security Agency, the NSA. And after a day of saying, yep, I know they're spying on me and the Biden administration must be making them do it, how very fascist of President Joe Biden, he admitted, oh, yes, well, I was just trying to get an interview with President Putin, so I've been talking to Russians. It's like, oh, interesting. The NSA put out an announcement saying we haven't been targeting Tucker Carlson. We do sometimes when we are monitoring foreign sources, we overhear their communications with Americans, but we're targeting foreign sources. So how long has Tucker Carlson been communicating with the Kremlin to organize an interview with Vladimir Putin? We don't know, but there appears to be some degree of penetration into American media, into American conservative media by adversarial foreign forces. I would imagine that's also true of the far left, where the president of Syria, President Assad, pays money to little far left bloggers who are very rude about President Biden and tend to exaggerate America's role in undermining governments or causing conflicts around the world. Because it's true, in the ongoing fight against communism, the CIA, the FBI, the American government has definitely been complicit in some things that are not heroic, that are condemnable. And we hope that the American government is oriented towards doing better now. And I think Joe Biden understands that there's still a communist government in Cuba, and that communist government is oppressing its people and depriving them of the benefits of a functioning, relatively free market. Because capitalism is at its best when it's well regulated and not crony capitalism, whereby bought politicians, such as bought out Republican politicians who owe a lot to very wealthy donors, act in the interests of these crony capitalists by advocating to not only cut taxes, but to underfund the IRS so that the IRS can't audit wealthy people, so that wealthy people can flourish in an environment where they know nobody's going to check if they're paying their taxes. So they can just effectively get away with not paying income tax and not not disclosing how much they have in terms of capital appreciation or asset appreciation, whatever wealthy people do to circumvent having to contribute to the societies that scaffolded their success. And the infrastructure, the societal infrastructure that has scaffolded their success and made their success possible. Because you don't have billionaires without having an education system and roads and airports and a transport system, all of which have been paid for by broad tax systems that have proportionately gathered a lot of money from wealthy people. Wealthy people are like, yes, we have a lot of money. We have a whole heap of money. So we don't want to give the government some of that money because it's more. If a low-income person doesn't have to pay tax, well, why should we? We are a gift to society. Look at, we're going to space and we're inspiring all of you. We're a gift. We shouldn't have to contribute to roads, to the actual space authority that does more concerted outreach programs to space. Bernard Dole is here and says, "G'day, Dav." G'day. And Molly's here. Molly, hello. Look at me broadcasting in US time. In Singapore, it would be late, and I would actually no, I used to broadcast around this time in Singapore. So maybe it's not all that special for me to be broadcasting at that time. It feels weird for me because look, I've got sunlight, I've got some natural light. Oh, and unnatural light, electric light. We all have to work through our own relationship to energy consumption and generating carbon dioxide gases ourselves. Carbon release, carbon in any form. Carbon monoxide, which is deadly. Don't try and sleep in your car if you live in Texas and your local energy grid has a collapse because Texan politicians Republican politicians have decided that you shouldn't be on the federal electricity grid, or you shouldn't be on a shared electricity grid because then you'd be regulated, and regulation is all democratic and therefore undesirable. So your electricity grid collapses, and then you have hundreds of deaths of people deprived of heat and energy and running water, and people sleep in their cars and get carbon monoxide poisoning because they don't understand that is toxic to humans, or people just plainly freeze to death. Some people die of carbon monoxide poisoning and their own lack of understanding that is toxic. But some people are also just desperate not to freeze to death, and many people did freeze to death. And the Texas Republicans have just doubled down by prioritizing prosecuting people who have inadvertently voted when Texan laws made them ineligible to vote because they were on supervised release. Texas is going to do nothing to fix that problem, because that's the trouble with bought politicians who aren't functioning as public servants, but who are secretly serving servants to crony capitalists who have a crony system of capitalism rather than a well-regulated system of capitalism for the people. So it's not really a free market. It's a market that provides excuses and cushions and subsidies for the very wealthy to gamble with people's lives and to gamble on the off chance that they will make extraordinary profits and then not feed any share of that profit back into the system that scaffolded their wealth creation. So I'm about to go out for a walk with my family now. Yesterday we explored Boston and walked along the Freedom Trail, and I visited the site of the Boston Massacre, where an 11-year-old boy hassled a British soldier who was stationed outside Customs House, which was a center where taxes were collected. And Americans at the time resented the presence of British soldiers. So an 11-year-old boy taunted a soldier to say, "You owe money to my master." The soldier explained that the debt had recently actually been settled, but a crowd gathered and the taunts grew, and people threw snowballs and people threw rocks at the soldiers. More soldiers came, British soldiers, and the crowd was chanting, "Fire, we dare you to fire." And some of those soldiers were presumably growing fearful for their lives. Someone warned the captain of that unit that if anybody fires here, then there's going to be a massacre and your own lives will be forfeit. And he said he knew. And this is the foundation of America's justice system, which is that, yes, the soldiers did start firing. 5 people were killed, 2 instantly and 3 died days later in hospital from their gunshot wounds. One of those injured people who subsequently died said that he did not hold those soldiers responsible for his death, and he understood that the crowd had been threatening and that he was part of that crowd that was threatening the soldiers and escalating the aggression of that event. And John Adams, who was going to become America's second president, was a lawyer who defended the soldiers. So that was the founding of America's commitment to ostensibly a fair justice system. But one interesting thing about John Adams' defense of the soldiers was that he blamed the crowd's behavior on a freed slave, Crispus Attucks, who was in the crowd and who was also shouting at the soldiers and trying to provoke the soldiers. But he was basically saying, see, an uncivilized black man was responsible for the crowd and various other reprobates, so you can't possibly hold the soldiers accountable. So this was held to be a great triumph of America's legal system. Like, look, even when it's our enemies, we're so emotionally invested in justice. And none of the soldiers were put to death, but 2 of them were branded with an M for manslaughter because they had caused people's deaths. But the captain of the unit was found not guilty and the others were acquitted. So yes, that was some interesting stuff I read about Boston Massacre before I physically visited the site and told my children, hey, an 11-year-old helped kick off this event that then helped sour Americans on the presence of British soldiers and helped move history forward towards that point of rejecting British influence, and that the Sons of Liberty then threw tea into the harbor of Boston Harbor. Molly says, do you like Boston? And I will say, yes, it's gorgeous. The temperature is so livable right now. I know it's summer, but this is such a delightful summer. It's much less humid than Singapore. We're going to spend more time outside, I think, because we were a bit wussy. We were a bit weak before, and we didn't acclimatize ourselves very well, or at least the adults in our family didn't. The children always had to be outside at school for school playtime and things, so they seemed to get used to it. Their father and I were not very good at planning outside day activities when it was really hot in Singapore. In Boston, we spent a whole heap of time outside yesterday, even though the children were tired, because their bodies are used to a reversed day-night time. Christopher said, I made his day. I'm so glad. You made my day. You made my day by welcoming me to the United States. And I've been really looking forward to this day for so long. And it's had to be postponed because of COVID. Some of that postponement worked with me because I didn't want to move to a country where President Trump was the president. But we ousted him. I say we, I didn't vote against him. I didn't vote for him. Obviously, I didn't vote. I'm still not entitled to, and it'll probably be a while. But I'm part of a movement of denouncing the contagion of cruelty, denouncing the nihilistic, society-destroying glee that functions under a guise of patriotism and protecting traditional norms, protecting gun rights, etc. I've been working to unpick the falsities behind all of those positions, to say that the Second Amendment's been misinterpreted. It's, in historical context, a well-regulated militia is literally that, a well-regulated militia, a group of people co-opted to function as an informal army to protect the United States, a group of volunteers, but well-regulated, to be allowed to purchase weapons to arm themselves because they're America's informal army, because America didn't quite have its stuff together at that point to have a formal army. Now it does. America has such a huge military budget that it's atrocious that there is any lapse in services for veterans, that there are any deficits there. Hi, sweetie, you ready to go?
Yes. I need to cure the hiccups and we've done that by this out.
We do, Daddy bought some.
Oh, cool.
We've got some, it's in the kitchen, sweetie. But I'm also just going to say goodbye and we can go. He wants to cure the hiccups by getting more screen time. And I'm like, no, you don't need that. I'm coming out. Molly says, I'm so happy you made it here. How was your flight? Was empty. On the first leg, we were the only people in our section. And on the second leg, there was also one other family. And so that was good in terms of feeling safe that we weren't potentially sharing air with asymptomatic COVID carriers. And I guess they'd already have to have a test as well. We had to have a test, a negative COVID test, in order to board the flight and to be fully vaccinated, at least the adults. So yeah, the flight wasn't too bad. When you have children, you have to be awake when your children are awake, and that's tricky if you're very tired. But the flight attendants didn't have many other people to look after. So there was one point I passed out from tiredness, and I was like, oh, I know my daughter's still awake and watching television, but I'm just falling asleep. And I went, the flight attendants will help her if she needs anything. I slept really badly because I was just, as a mother, going, I have to be conscious while my daughter's conscious. But we all made it, and we've just been adjusting over the last few days to being awake during the night and vice versa. Molly still suggests wearing masks when going indoors. Absolutely. Fair point. It's really bizarre to see people's faces at all. So we haven't been wearing masks outdoors, which is different to Singapore. In Singapore, you wear masks everywhere. You take them off to eat. No, don't have screens. I'll just say goodbye to everybody, okay? You found it?
And what?
The apple cider vinegar? Do you find it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good. Okay, now don't have screens. You can read for 2 minutes because Mommy's getting off in 2 minutes, okay? You could read the books, Facts About America book I bought. I bought a book about, I went to Barnes and Nobles and I cried from happiness. It was so awesome. I love America. Oh my gosh, I love the bookshops. And I loved being able to see people's faces. But I did have a mask that I put on when I went into a shopping mall. And I did feel very conflicted about that because I approve of it, but other people aren't doing it. I guess you just have to make your own peace with doing what you think is important. And I do think it's important. And I do think the CDC should ramp up advice to have mask mandates to try and cut off the Delta surge before it spreads. And let's have a tiny quick look. There's some hospitalized patients are fully vaccinated, but that's just because the vaccinated portion of adults is high. It's not as high as 85%. In America, it's what? But in certain states, it'll be, actually, no, it's not going to be 85% fully vaccinated anywhere because it's 63.3 in Massachusetts. Oh, well, in any case, if the non-vaccinated portion is higher, more people are vaccinated than unvaccinated, then yes, some of the infected people are going to be vaccinated because you can have breakthrough cases. But it's a much smaller proportion of the overall population. So the population that's vaccinated, maybe 10% of those people have breakthrough cases, but with the non-vaccinated, maybe 30% of them are contracting COVID, and some of those people are getting hospitalized and some of those people are dying because you're protected, you're drastically protected, or your risk is drastically reduced of getting severe COVID or death if you are vaccinated. A former head of the CDC, former director of the CDC, and he says it's not vaccinated people who should be most concerned. Globally, we're far from the end of the pandemic. Delta is at least 2 times more contagious than the original virus, which means it will infect and kill more people. Most countries have so far avoided big surges, but haven't had access to the vaccines needed to vaccinate their populations. Many of these countries will likely see explosive spread of COVID over the coming weeks and months. But in many places with high rates of vaccination, including much of the US, the worst is over. Though we'll likely see big increases in the United States cases, future waves won't be as deadly. That's because 80% of the most vulnerable Americans, people over 65, are fully vaccinated. Fewer vulnerable people means fewer deaths. Whereas the infection fatality rate in the US before vaccines was 1 in 200, it could now be less than 1 in 500 or as low as 1 in 1,000 in the coming months because of vaccine protection, even if we see many breakthrough infections. If disease continues to spread, deaths may increase, particularly amongst adults who are not vaccinated. Because the most vulnerable are vaccinated, the overall increase will be much smaller than past horrific increases. In the months ahead, more cases won't correlate to more deaths in the same way as earlier in the pandemic. I'll just take myself. Hey, Peter Bittner's turned up. Hi, Peter. I'm just looking at a graph shared by a former director of the CDC. What I want to draw attention to is the fact that in the second wave, these are figures from the UK, the United Kingdom. The second wave has, when there were higher cases in different age groups, there were higher deaths. And now in the gray section of this graph, the third wave, there's cases again, high cases, but the deaths section is much smaller. And that's because the vulnerable are much more likely, they were much more motivated to obtain a vaccine, and they were able to do so in the UK. So that's just that important thing, that there's less risk to the elderly, but there is an increased risk to children now. So Dr. Tom Frieden hasn't got around to discussing that yet, but parents will be acutely aware of this the risk of this surge of Delta impacting their children and being a problem when school reopens in September, and the fact that the danger to the children is a function of Republican irresponsibility and the irresponsibility and depraved indifference, the reckless, depraved, murderous indifference of contrarian news hosts on Fox, on OAN, on Newsmax, who have promulgated vaccine disinformation. Oh, Alexandra Legion says, hi, Dav, welcome to the US. Left you a message on Patreon. I'll check it out. Looking forward to seeing you more frequently. Your work gets better every day. Also liking HAPS. Hey, Peter, that's a compliment for your platform, which is awesome. I've taken a photo, Alexandra, Alexandra from the Rainbow League. That's really fantastic and a great note for me to end the broadcast on. I'm going to say my insight to advertising is that we should think strategically instead of just, oh, look, this is bad for Republicans. We need to sometimes think, who are we trying to reach, and construct ads that will reach certain targets. So when we, hi, sweetie, you ready for mommy to come? Yeah. Could you brush your hair? Oh, I have the hairbrush.
Why do I need to wash my hair?
Because we're going out for a walk.
I don't want to go.
But we're going to go have adventures. Do you want to eat one of the pancakes left over in the fridge before we go out? Let's wrap up. Anyway, I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you so much for listening for tuning into the broadcast today, and take care, everybody. Let's set an example for wearing masks just to counter the ice cream. It's 10:42. You could talk to your daddy.
Any chips or
Yeah, that's true. You haven't had any cucumber yet either.
there's no gummy bears either.
Daddy bought some more. He bought some for the walk. Can you believe it?
There's gummy bears.
You could talk to Daddy. I'm saying goodbye. What am I saying? Oh, yes, targeted ads. There are suburban women who need to hear from us about the fact that there is a choice. Democrats aren't communists. It's a fear campaign that has no basis in fact. The infrastructure package is not causing inflation. If you take out the inflation around automobiles, which have gone up in price because demand has gone from flat demand in a pandemic, you didn't want to drive around so much, to surging demand.
For the next walk.
Yeah, but he means the walk today, the next walk that we're doing
But when
today.
it was on the train, you did one lap, and then you're like, no, the next one, like the one after this one.
He means the walk we're going on now. But you need to brush your hair. Please take this hairbrush
No,
with
he
you.
said later.
Good brushing. That's
He
it.
said later.
Do you want to lean in and say hi? This is my daughter. She is such a little
Ice
sass
cream.
basket at the moment. Such a little sass
Ice
basket.
cream.
But she knows that she has had a big
Ice cream.
journey and that her parents are hoping.
Ice cream.
No. And if you ask for ice cream again, Mummy's you're gonna lose privileges in some department. Yeah, don't mention it now. This is not ice cream time of day. No. But if Daddy says that he'll think about it, maybe a gelato after the walk or something, then possibly yes.
Daddy.
Yes, ask Daddy.
Gelato.
You should always ask Daddy when Mummy's
Remember
on a
while we're
broadcast.
walking home, we had some.
Yeah, we had a gelato yesterday. I know.
Was that dessert?
Yeah, that was dessert.
Well, today's a dessert.
Yeah, if you have gelato, then you don't get any other sugar.
What?
What? Can you believe
If
it?
you have ice
The oppression.
cream,
She's much better at managing her weight than me because she's very active and she does eat a good balance of. What do you eat that's good? It's fresh cucumber, capsicum,
strawberries, raspberries,
frozen raspberries, apple.
apple.
Apple. So she's good. In fact, better than me, but I'm still your mama and I still have to say we've all got to try and get diabetes. We've all got to try to have a good.
I don't have diabetes.
I know. We've all got to try and to never get diabetes. We've all got to try really
I
hard.
never got diabetes.
It's a disease that tends to happen to you later in life if you eat too much sugar.
But you said, yeah, never. And it was like you're talking to me.
Okay,
So
but I'm
technically,
yeah,
you're saying that
technically.
I have to work on never getting it.
We all have to
I
work
need-
to include as much fresh food into our diet as possible. That's like a good health rule, isn't it? That's why it's good you've got so many fresh foods you like. All right, we'll brush hair here. Christopher's heading into the office. So that's okay, Christopher, because we're going too. We're going out for a walk and we are not going to have any
Mommy,
more.
why are you still doing a podcast?
Okay, I'm saying goodbye.
I mean, like, why are you still doing broadcasts to people in the U.S. when you could just, like, text them?
Oh, I can't text all these people, baby. 282 people have watched, or at least watched a little bit of our broadcast today. So
Yeah,
that's,
but Mommy, you're in the U.S. and they're from the U.S.
this is what I do, Baba. I broadcast to the US, only now I get to do it from inside the US, which makes it even more relevant because I'm here and I'm sharing in the same
No, it
concerns.
kind of makes it like if
They-
someone you know says, "Oh, this is my friend Bungas. I like it," and then you know their address, but they
No, I don't tell the address, baby. We don't tell the address of where we are. We just say,
no, if
we're
your
in the-
friend.
okay. Goodbye, everybody.
Mommy,
Thanks.
I
No,
still
I'm saying
have a
goodbye.
point.
You have a point, but I don't know that it's the most relevant point in the entire world.
Hold on. This means you'll have more broadcasts because they'll be the same time.
Exactly. That's a very good point. I will have more broadcasts because it's easier for mommy to broadcast, but they can be shorter ones. Wow, I'm getting the evil eye. Bye, Alexandra. Bye. And thanks to CL who just subscribed. Molly says she's going to be a handful as a teenager. Are you going to be a handful? I feel like you're already a teenager.
I'm not a teenager.
I know, but it feels a little bit like you are.
No.
Because you have so many exciting points that you want to make about everything.
I still have the point.
You still have a point. Thanks so much. Bye, Christopher. Harry
Remember.
Pilot. Oh, they say how long before you acquire a Boston accent? You might start to talk in a little bit of an American accent, do you think? All right, let's wave goodbye. Bye. Yeah, I'm ending it. See, click end broadcast.